What do you get when you combine meat with wine and vegetables and put everything in one pot? It's a mouth-watering stew. Today I'm sharing my favorite one-pot meals, beginning with a hearty beef stew, followed with a rustic French classic, coq au vin. Finally, the technique for creating a delectable veal stew, bursting with spring vegetables. A stew is prepared generally with an inexpensive, tougher cut of meat like beef chuck, chicken legs, and veal shoulder. So what you need to make a really good stew is a heavy-duty pot with a tight-fitting lid. Today we're going to begin with beef stew using chuck. We're also going to be doing a coq au vin, which uses the dark meat of the chicken legs and thighs, and veal. So let's proceed. We're going to do the beef stew first. So a stew is generally prepared with small cuts of meat, small cubes, with the addition of vegetables that are cooked in enough liquid to generously cover the entire thing. Now, this is slab bacon, and this is what we are going to render to start browning the beautiful piece of chuck I have in front of me. Cut the bacon into half-inch cubes, and this goes right into your pan and start rendering the fat. This is a fatty slab bacon. So there we have our bacon rendering. Now this beautiful piece of chuck, cut this into nice squares. So while the bacon is melting, season with salt and pepper. Use kosher salt for this. You want to season generously. A little bit of pepper. So we'll save the lardons. These will be added back into your stew. And now just put your salted, peppered meat in the fat. You do not want to crowd the pan. And don't try to move them for a minute or two. As it's browning, you can be cutting up your wonderful mushrooms. You can use white button mushrooms. You could use shiitakes, but very nice bunch of mushrooms, 2 ounces of mushrooms, and some yellow onions cut up. 1 medium large onion peeled and cut into squares, and 4 cloves of peeled, finely minced garlic. Now adjust your heat while you're browning the meat. Just take a look. See that wonderful caramelized color it gets? So you want to do each side, 6 sides to a cube. Now, meats won't brown at a low temperature, which is why it's very important to sear the meat on the stovetop first. If you don't do this, you will not have that nice, dark, rich stew that we are looking for. The meat looks very good. I will put the meat in the bowl with the rest of it. See how nicely colored this meat is. That is exactly the color you want. There's a little excess fat, and I'm going to pour it right into a reserve bowl. And now all those nice brown bits that are on the bottom of the pan, add some beef stock, 1 cup, preferably homemade if you have it. And this is a great wooden spoon. Has a flat bottom. In just a few strokes, releases all that stuff from the bottom of the pan. Try to find one of these if you can. Very good spoon to have. Okay, so now this liquid goes right over the meat. And look at the pan. Nothing in there. It's almost clean. So to this, on low heat, add a couple tablespoons of olive oil. I like to add the onions first. Cook until translucent. That takes about 3 minutes. Now you can add also 4 cloves of garlic finely minced. If you don't like garlic, you can omit the garlic in this stew. And now you can add your mushrooms, cleaned and cut in half, stems removed. and cook this for, just about 2 minutes, just until they start to soften. So there, the mushrooms are soft, the onions have a nice color, and they are nicely translucent, and it's time to thicken the stew. And we do this by adding 2 tablespoons of flour, all-purpose flour. Sprinkle it over your onions and mushrooms. And stir that around. You must cook that flour to make it palatable. So we're cooking it over low-medium heat. And for added flavor, a tablespoon of Dijon mustard. This adds just a little bit more flavor. And it smells very good. And now you see that the bottom of the pan has, again, accumulated some brown bits. The flour has made everything a little bit sticky. We're going to add 2 cups of beef stock and stir this around. Now, here goes the meat. Boy, does that look good. And now, red wine, 2 cups. And now add a few sprigs of thyme and 2 bay leaves. Submerge them in the liquid. Now bring that to a boil, reduce to a simmer, cover, and you will cook it for approximately 1.5 hours, skimming every now and then, just taking off any excess fat. So, oh yes. Now look how much reduction has taken place. And the beef is beautiful, the mushrooms are tender. Now is time to add 1 pound of fingerling potatoes or Yukon Gold cut in half. These have to cook for another 25 minutes. So this is at the end of 1.5 hours where the meat is very tender. You're adding the potatoes. Now make sure we submerge those in the gravy. Really beautiful. And about 12 ounces or so of cipollini onions. These have been blanched and peeled. You can also use pearl onions, red or white. Cover again, and in approximately 25 minutes, the potatoes will be done. Check after about 20, just to make sure. Well, here's the stew. It looks good, and it is ready to serve. Look at the color. The meat is not falling apart, and yet it is totally fork tender. So beautiful. I think it's very nice. Oh, stir in the lardon. So now I like serving it in a heated bowl like this with some noodles. This small bowl will be welcomed by anyone you bring to your home. Look how pretty, a little bit of carrot, a little bit of vinegary, finely grated horseradish, and a little bit of chopped dill. Now that is beef stew at its best. Coq au vin is a classic French dish, which simply means to cook chicken in wine. Coq is a chicken, an old tough rooster, and au vin means in the wine. But today I'm using organic chicken legs and thighs. First thing that you have to do if you're going to make a good coq au vin is to marinate the chicken in red wine, 2 cups of red wine, which is approximately half a bottle, overnight in the refrigerator. And cover with plastic wrap, refrigerate 12 hours or even a little bit longer. And then you're ready to start your coq au vin. I'm rendering the fat from 8 ounces of slab bacon, which we've cut into small cubes. And it's rendering very nicely. And we're using acid. The red wine is an acid. And it is also, because it's an acid, it's a tenderizer. So the chicken I've started to drain. This is what it looks like after 12 hours in red wine. It has turned a deep kind of purpley color. No surprise, having been submerged in red wine. Save the wine that's going to be added to the stew. And the drier your chicken is before browning, the browner your chicken's going to get. Now, we need a lot of garlic, 8 cloves of garlic, and I thought I'd show you just a cute trick for peeling an entire head of garlic. Just put the whole head of garlic in a bowl. You have to have 2 of the same size bowl for this. Put the other bowl right on the top like this and shake. Something good is happening. I smell a lot of garlic. Ah, and look what's in the bowl. 1 perfectly peeled clove, 2, 3, 4. This is the fastest, most efficient way of peeling garlic I have ever found. So here we have all our garlic nicely peeled. Fun, right? Try it. Give it to your kids to do. They will love this method. Okay, I'm going to remove the lardon. Just put on a piece of paper toweling to drain. These will be reincorporated into the stew, into the coq au vin at the end. Season as you did the beef with salt and pepper. Very nice. I'll do all the drumsticks first, and then we have the thighs next. Let it cook a little bit before you try to turn it. Just like pan searing, you want to get the brownness happening before you try to turn it and tear the skin or tear the meat. Always start with the skin side down. And if you find that it is splattering, just use your spatter guard. And so here we have gorgeously browned chicken. And now right into the hot pan, start sauteing 1 medium onion, chopped. And this will be the sauce for your beautiful coq au vin. And as soon as this starts cooking, you'll add your 8 cloves of garlic that have been finely sliced. Now, as the onions and garlic cook, I'm releasing from the bottom all that brown stuff. That's called the fond, F-O-N-D in French. And speaking French, the other thing that's very French here is my mise en place. Put in place all the things that I need for the stew. So now the onions have turned translucent, the garlic is cooking. Add 10 white pearl onions, blanched and peeled. They go right in. And then a half a pound of cremini mushrooms or white mushrooms, button mushrooms, the stem trimmed but still intact. And so now add your mushrooms. And so now we're going to add tomato paste, just 1 tablespoon of tomato paste. This adds a little subtle flavor, but also a little bit of color to our coq au vin. And some flour. 3 tablespoons of flour. This is our thickening agent. It will make sure that the sauce is not too runny. Cook this for 2 minutes just to cook the starch in the flour. And now, 2 tablespoons of the very best cognac. We're making a French dish. We might as well add French ingredients. This will help reglaze the fond in the bottom of the pan and add again yet another beautiful subtle flavor. So nice. Okay, and now return to the pot, all of this rendered bacon and the lovely chicken pieces. All of this fits very nicely in this beautiful enameled cast iron pot. And I'm putting the chicken all in one layer on top of the vegetables. Add a couple sprigs of thyme and some bay leaves. And now your red wine. And it's a good idea, if this is the marinating red wine, to strain this over the mix. There might be a little bit of chicken fat or something in there from the chicken. And if you want a really earthy taste, you can add, at this point, the chicken liver, an ounce or two of chicken liver. This will disappear into the sauce. Bring this to a simmer, which it is doing right now. Cover and transfer to a 325-degree preheated oven and cook until the chicken is cooked through and the vegetables are tender, 45 minutes to an hour. Very easy. Looks absolutely beautiful. Now, I think there's a little bit of fat on the top, which can be skimmed off by just sliding a spoon along the surface. And it's not so much from the chicken as it is from the lardon. And if you chill this, all the fat will come to the surface and you can just scrape it off and then reheat. That's enough. And now we have some mashed potato. You can make a nice mound of mashed potato on a plate. And give everyone one thigh and one drumstick. The color is superb. Of course, we want some of this beautiful gravy and some of the mushrooms and pearl onions. Sprinkle with some parsley. Hearty, delicious. This is called a white stew because the meat is never browned. The stock is thickened first by a roux and then by a second thickener called a liaison, which in this case is eggs and cream. And the eggs and the cream make the sauce exceptionally rich and delicious. So the first thing to do is to have your meat, 2 pounds of boneless veal shoulder cut into 1.5-inch squares. We're going to make a bouquet garni in a cheesecloth. So 1 carrot, 1 small onion, and you can just roughly slice this onion. This too is going into our bouquet garni. This is going to cook right in with the veal and the other aromatics to make a flavorful veal stew. Here's our parsley, like 4 or 5 sprigs of parsley, some thyme, 1 clove of garlic smashed, and 2 bay leaves. And you can break the bay leaves if you like. And then just make a little pouch. You can tie this without string, and you can just do this in a knot. And make sure you use cotton cheesecloth. So here's your little pouch, ready to go. And bring 1/4 cup of white wine to a boil. And we're going to add the veal straight into the white wine. And this is typically like a Navarone of lamb. When the veal is young, the vegetables are tender and young. And this is what a spring stew is all about. Stir the meat into the white wine and add 6 cups of water, cold water. And to this, 1 teaspoon of salt. And oh, I forgot to put the peppercorns into the bouquet garni. I'll just throw 1/4 teaspoon in. You can pick those out later. But they are an essential ingredient in the aromatics. So stir the meat a little bit. You're going to bring this to a boil, reduce to a simmer. And once it starts to simmer, add your big bouquet garni and cook for 1 hour, skimming with a spoon like this to take the scum off the surface. Okay, our veal is just coming to a simmer. With a spoon, make room in the center for your bouquet garni, and the aromatics will continue flavoring the meat for the entire hour in which it's going to cook uncovered gently at a simmer. So here is our veal. The liquid has reduced to, oh my gosh, a fraction of what it was. This is after 1 hour. Now add to the pot 3 large artichoke hearts. So cut this into 6 pieces. Depending on the size of your artichoke heart, it's going to take anywhere from, let's say, 20 to 25 minutes to get these tender. It's been cooking for an additional 25 minutes with the artichoke hearts. Now, add your green peas, 1 pound. Doesn't look like a pound, but it is, of fresh green peas. If you can't find fresh, you could use the baby frozen. Okay, so that's 3 minutes. You want to now strain your liquid. Remove the bouquet garni. So gently remove the peas, the meat, the artichoke hearts to a bowl. And you can strain the rest right through a sieve. And we're ready to do our roux. 4 tablespoons of butter, and we're going to add 1/4 cup of flour, and you just have to cook it for about 1 minute. Add your stock, and this is a velouté. Now, as this comes to a simmer, it will thicken a little bit more, and you'll be ready to create the liaison of egg yolk and cream. Oh, so this is smooth and it is thickening. So turn the heat way down. You can break your egg yolk right into the bowl. Save the white for something else, meringues and other things. And add 1/4 cup of heavy cream. We're going to add a little bit of the velouté now to the egg and cream. Now, this is called tempering. You want to add just a little bit at a time so that you do not curdle the egg yolk. And now you can add this warm mixture to the pot. Stir it in. We have our meat, our fava beans. Oh, I can put those right here. Those are going to be added. This is 1 pound. And now, just add your veal right back to the pot. At this point, I like to stir everything with a rubber spatula because I don't want to break anything. And one last lovely little addition is the juice of 1 lemon. Spectacular. Well, there you have it, your Blanquette de Veau, spring veal stew. And I like to serve this in a spectacular bowl like this. Now you could serve this over a beautiful risotto, or that could be on the side. Some freshly chopped parsley and freshly chopped dill. So I hope you've enjoyed this lesson on stewing, and we'll try making one of these hearty, satisfying meals for dinner tonight or for this weekend for your friends and family. Thanks very much for watching this episode of Martha's Cooking School. I'll see you next lesson. Every culture in the world has its own soup. There's borscht from Russia, cazuela from Chile, bouillabaisse from France, and miso soup from Japan. But closer to home, I'll teach you how to stir up a pot of everyone's favorite, chicken soup. Then learn how to transform an assortment of garden vegetables into a hearty minestrone soup. Finally, an impressive yet simple recipe for a brilliantly colored spinach cream soup. Soup's on! So let's start with classic chicken soup. I know that your mom had her version and your next door neighbor had her version. Well, this is our version, and the final result is really delicious and useful. So start with one chicken, a nice 3.5 to 4 pound chicken, organically grown if possible, cut into 8 pieces. And use a pot that is just large enough for all the ingredients. So I'm putting all the chicken in, the larger pieces towards the bottom. And chicken soup is different from chicken stock in that we are using chicken with lots of meat on it. The meat is what gives more flavor. If we were using just assorted bones and backs and necks, you would get your stock, but you wouldn't get the rich, rich flavor of this chicken soup. So there we have the chickens in the water, and start with cold water too. And next we have our vegetables. 1 carrot, and these vegetables are the vegetables for the flavoring, and they really won't be the vegetables that you will eat. These will be diminished in flavor by the time you finish cooking the soup, and you'll want to put fresh vegetables in at the last minute into the clear stock. So this is 1 parsnip. My mother always put parsnip in hers. Parsnips add a subtle sweetness to the chicken soup. Very, very flavorful. I love it a lot. 1 yellow onion cut up into chunks. 2 ribs of celery cut into chunks. Some fresh thyme, some fresh parsley. And about 1/4 teaspoon of peppercorns and 1 or 2 bay leaves. And we could use just a tiny bit more water in here. We want to keep the chicken covered by 1 inch during the entire cooking process. And we can also add at this time 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. Bring this to a boil, reduce to a simmer, skim, and cook for about 16 to 18 minutes. A thermometer should read about 160 degrees in the breasts and 165 degrees in the legs and the thighs. And you'll have perfectly cooked chicken. Now, I've diligently been skimming during the last 18 minutes. Skimming is very important since the impurities from the chicken will cause the broth to become cloudy, and you want to get rid of that. The vegetables have become very soft, and they've imparted their flavor to the broth, and that's why these are only soup vegetables. We're going to add garnish vegetables at the end. So it looks good. It looks very clear. And because this has been cooking for almost 18 minutes, I am going to remove the pieces of chicken. Just take them out and put them on a baking sheet like this, because they have to cool so that you can then take the meat off the bones and the skin off the meat. What goes back is just nice, large chunks of chicken. So now it's time to pull off the meat. We want the chicken to cool a little bit. Just slide the skin off. This goes into the discard bowl. And if you're like I am and have lots and lots of animals, you can use a lot of the discard for the animals. Grind it up or cut it up into small pieces for the dogs. They love snacks. And you can put the bones right back into the broth. If some of the chicken seems to be a little underdone, don't worry, because it's going to get cooked a little bit longer in the soup when you add the garnish vegetables back into the broth. That's a nice piece of breast meat. And there's not much meat on those little wings, but wings are my favorite part of the chicken. So there. So now turn this back on and simmer for an additional hour. So now strain the soup. It's cooked for an hour longer, and you want to get out all the bones and all the cooked vegetables. And you should be left with approximately 6 cups of broth. And I like to press a little bit to get all the liquid out. And the reason I'm not pouring the whole thing into the strainer is, heaven forbid if you miss. And this is all discard. Look at the great color. It's a beautiful color. And now, with less liquid in, you can feel free to pour. And we have just about 6 cups of lovely broth. Now, this should stand The fat will rise to the surface if there's any more, and straining out all these aromatics will certainly result in a clearer, cleaner broth. Now, chicken broth like this can be made up to 3 days in advance if refrigerated separately like this, with the broth in one container, the chicken tightly covered in another. And then you can proceed with your soup right before you're ready to serve it. So I'm almost finished, a little piece of the wishbone, finished shredding the meat. I'm chunking the meat, not really shredding it. I think it's so pretty when you get big, nice chunks of chicken like that in your soup. And now we have a little fat on the broth. I'm going to take a spoon and just take this fat off the top, leaving us with a very nice, clear broth. So see, we got a lot of fat off the top. That will be discarded. Now this can go right back into your stock pot. And I pour off, leaving that little bit of solids in the bottom. I don't want to put that in because that is a little bit of cloudiness that can be discarded. And your vegetables, 2 carrots cut up into 1/4-inch pieces, 2 ribs of celery cut up, 1 medium to small parsnip cut up, and these will be your garnish vegetables. Cook for anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes until the vegetables are fork tender. So now you can add all the chicken, which is quite a lot, or you could reserve a little bit for chicken salad for tomorrow. Just warm until the chicken is heated through and ladle it out. You could add some cooked rice to the soup at this point. You could spoon it over rice. Any way you choose. You will love what this tastes like, and it is healthy and good for you. Enjoy. One of everyone's favorite soups is minestrone, and this is a classic minestrone. It's a beloved Italian soup that's hearty and healthy. Minestra generally means bigness, and this is big because it has so many ingredients. And they can vary. It includes lots of vegetables, leafy greens, and beans. The foundation of flavor in a minestrone soup is something called a sofrito. It's a common element in Italian soup making, and it consists of a trio of celery, carrots, and onion. And we'll get to the sofrito, but let's do the beans first, because this is what you have to do the day before you make your soup. You need 3/4 cup of cannellini beans, and they're really white Italian kidney beans. Dried, they're plump and they're creamy, tender beans when they are reconstituted with moisture, and they soak up lots of flavors in which they're cooked. So cover this with water. Water to cover like this, and just let them sit out overnight, 8 to 12 hours. And they plump up to look like this. Look at the difference. Big difference. They more than double in size. And so now these are ready to cook. Strain these. This water can be discarded. And get this right into a deep pot with 1/2 of an onion. Take the outer skin off the onion, and you can cut this into just 3 or 4 chunks. 1 bay leaf. No salt. Salt tends to toughen the beans. And 8 cups of water. If you're a vegetarian, stop here. But if you're not a vegetarian, ask your butcher for the end of a prosciutto. This has skin, fat, and a little bit of the prosciutto meat. And cut this into 2 or 3 pieces and add this to your water. So now bring this to a boil, and reduce the heat to a simmer, and cook for approximately 30 to 45 minutes until the beans are to your taste. Al dente for some and well cooked for others. Now the beans have cooked. They're tender, even plumper than they were after the soaking. They're even cracking a little bit to indicate the nice creamy interior. I'm letting those cool a tiny bit while I start the sofrito. 1/3 cup of olive oil. I remember my first introduction to sofrito was in Camaiore in the mountains. And the lady of the house where I was staying made sofrito for almost everything. Her tomato sauce, made from the fresh tomatoes in her garden, started with a sofrito. Everything she cooked started with a sofrito, which is 1 stalk of celery cut up into very fine dice, 1 onion cut up into very fine dice, and 1 carrot. This is the holy trinity of Italy. And if it had green pepper instead of carrot, it would be the Louisiana version of sofrito. So stir this until everything becomes translucent. This will take about 25 to 30 minutes. And now we can strain the beans. I have a strainer set over a measuring cup. You're going to pick out the ham and the onion, leaving the beans themselves. So there. Let these cool a little bit. Beans are ready. So after 25 minutes, the sofrito looks like this. It has a nice golden, deep brown color, and we add 1 medium leek, green and white parts, to this mix. Now, some garlic, 3 cloves of garlic. And this should take about 4 minutes. Now add your carrots, 2 carrots thinly sliced on the diagonal. Coat with that flavoring and the oil. 2 ribs of celery. Again, celery and carrots were in the sofrito, but now you'll have visible pieces. 1 large red potato. Zucchini. 1 medium zucchini, sliced thinly and quartered. And lastly, the string beans. 1/4 pound of beautiful fresh green beans. It smells very good. Okay, so this is getting ready. Now your other ingredients. 1 28-ounce can of plum tomatoes. The San Marzanos are very excellent. 1/4 head of Savoy cabbage. That's the nice crinkly cabbage. It's been chiffonaded finely. This adds a very nice texture to your minestrone. And then, oh, this is something, I don't know if you've seen it in the grocery store. It's cavolo nero, which is the Italian black kale. Very tasty and so good for you. So full of iron and other fantastic vitamins and minerals. So you need 1 bunch, about 5 ounces of that. And 4 cups of vegetable stock, and about 4 cups of the bean cooking water. And it's very nice to have all your ingredients ready before you really start doing this part of the soup. Okay, we're going to add our tomatoes. Now the tomatoes you just crush with a spoon, with your fingers, and add the juice. You hear the cooking stop, raise the heat a little bit. So now it's starting to look like minestrone. And now the cabbage. I love cabbage cooked in anything. That must be my Polish heritage. Very pretty. And then the kale, which I also love now. This is a fantastic kale. And now you can add also 4 cups of vegetable stock. If you happen to have it, and you should save rinds of Parmesan cheese in your freezer so you can add that to the soup. A chunk of prosciutto, like a 4-ounce end, and bay leaf. Some red hot pepper flakes. Start with 1/4 teaspoon. You might find that you like more, but 1/4 teaspoon really adds a lot of flavor to the soup. And 4 cups of the bean liquid. So here we have 6 cups. I will pour in 4. a little bit of salt, and a little bit of black pepper. Bring to a boil, reduce to a simmer, cover, and cook for 1 hour. So after 1 hour, add your beans, the cooked beans, right into the soup. These have to now cook for another 20 minutes, and your minestrone will be ready to serve. Covered. And we have one that's all done, finally. And let's show you what it looks like served. Put a nice big serving right there. And then some of the broth. Crusty, toasted Italian bread. A little spoon of homemade basil pesto right on top. Parmesan cheese. Let that cheese just melt into the hot soup and serve. Italian minestrone, the peasant soup from all the ingredients in your pantry. Very delicious. And now you know how to make it. Now I'd like to show you how to make a cream soup, a spinach cream soup. Classic cream soups were traditionally based on bechamel, which is essentially milk thickened by a roux. But today, you're just as likely to be served a cream soup that's based on a velouté, which is made by thickening stock with a roux. And to start with the roux, 5 tablespoons of butter into a pot like this. And now into the 5 tablespoons of butter, first add 1 onion that's been finely chopped. A yellow onion is good. So cook this for about 5 minutes until translucent. Have 4 cups of chicken stock ready. We're using a chicken stock. If you are a vegetarian, of course, you can use a vegetable stock. Now, while your onions are turning translucent, blanch your spinach. Salted water boiling on high, 2 pounds of washed spinach leaves. And do a few leaves at a time. And you just pretty much dunk them and remove them into an ice bath. By doing this, what you're really doing is getting the moisture out of the leaves, believe it or not, since you're putting it in moisture, but look at the color. And you're trying to preserve the color. Use one of these spiders. It really makes the task very easy. Oh, see now, the onions are almost translucent. Almost time to add the flour and start cooking down the roux. Well, let's finish this spinach first. This is not a long process, it's very easy. And notice why I put a strainer into the ice water. That way I don't have any ice in my spinach. Smart. So there. And now get this also into your towel. This process is used for getting the excess moisture out of a lot of things. If you're making cabbage pierogi, for example, you would be steaming your cabbage and squeezing out the excess moisture. So here we have our spinach. 2 pounds have been reduced to this more insignificant amount, but plenty for our velouté. And now to proceed with the roux, add 1/4 cup plus 1 tablespoon of all-purpose flour. Stir that into the butter mixture. Cook this for 1 minute, stirring constantly. You're cooking the flour, but we want the flour to enable the soup to thicken. And that's what it's going to do. And the onions are tender enough now so that they too can be pureed along with the spinach leaves to make that nice silky velouté that we're talking about. And now we add 4 cups of homemade chicken stock. Of course, you can use store-bought. Now raise the heat, stir, and cook until it comes to a boil. See, it looks very watery, but this will thicken up and it should reach the consistency of heavy cream once it comes to a boil. And then reduce the heat to a simmer. So our velouté is done. I just want to show you what it looks like. Let's see, it looks like the consistency of heavy cream, and it coats the back of a spoon. A little hard to see because of the color, but it is exactly the right consistency. And now, if you have a powerful blender, you can use a blender or you could use a food processor. Put some spinach in, a couple of scoops of the hot velouté. And be very careful when you turn this on that the cover is on well and tight. Sounds like you're at the dentist. Beautiful. And this goes right into a strainer. Look at the color. And what a beautiful thing to serve to guests. Takes a little while to put it through the sieve, but it is worth it. To enrich it, add a little bit of fat, like heavy cream. And cream soups are best served right after preparing, especially when using green vegetables. And if you don't serve it right away, it will lose some of its vibrancy. Look how beautiful. And this kind of soup warrants taking out your very best soup bowls. Now that is a phenomenal looking soup. So beautiful and so elegant. So if you'd like to garnish the spinach soup or any velouté soup, making tiny little croutons like this is a very elegant way to finish off an elegant soup. These are French bread. I'm browning them very carefully in a little bit of olive oil. You could use a little butter if you like. And you can make these ahead of time. Oh, see how pretty? Look at the color. If you were doing a pea soup, you would garnish with some fresh peas. But just that on top, that little crunchiness, spinach soup at its very best. Learning how to make these classic soups is a valuable lesson for the home cook. Success lies in using the best ingredients and combining them well, seasoning them correctly and cooking them just enough to bring out their elemental flavors. Thanks very much for watching this edition of Martha's Cooking School, and I'll see you at the next lesson. What do all of these mouth-watering dishes have in common? They're all made with a flavorful stock. So, in today's lesson, you'll learn the techniques for making rich, full-bodied stocks. We'll start with the basic chicken stock. And for the days you're short on time, I'll share my secret for cooking stock in a pressure cooker. Then I'll teach you how to roast the bones for brown beef stock. So good. You'll also discover what vegetables to use for creating an aromatic and tasty vegetable stock. Today's lesson is all about stocks. A stock is simply water simmered with bones. The meat left over on the bones adds flavor to the water, while the bones and the connective tissue break down and add body to the liquid in the form of gelatin. Stocks are the foundation for soups and sauces. They also add endless amounts of flavor when used as a substitute for water. Whenever you're cooking grains or braising meat, here are some of the tools needed for making stock. You'll need a stock pot, water, some chicken wings, legs, bits and pieces, and a mirepoix of carrots, celery, and onion. So we have about 5 pounds of chicken. And the smaller the pieces of chicken connected to the bones, the better. I see the backs here have a little bit of fat. I like to take off as much of the fat as possible prior to making the stock. And you see all of this red stuff here? This is parts of internal organs. You want to remove all of that too, and any bloody bits. So pick this out and then wash the chicken very well. Now there are important rules to remember when making a stock. A good stock starts with good ingredients. Your goal when making stock is to transfer all the flavor from those ingredients to the cooking liquid itself. So let me wash this. right into the stock pot. And you see, if you use butcher paper, parchment paper, cleanup is at a minimum. So you put your chicken in and water to cover. Bring this to a boil. And as it comes to a boil, you're going to see that some chicken fat arises, and you want to skim that off using a strainer like this or a ladle like this. These square ladles are phenomenal. And have a container for the fat. I'm going to cut up our mirepoix. Use twice as much onion as celery and carrot. And these can be cut into quarters. The onions, 2 onions, and 2 carrots. And just cut these into chunks. And don't forget, leave the celery leaves on. Now bring the liquid to a boil and then immediately turn it down. And keep everything submerged at all times. The reason that we use taller pots for most stocks is that there's less surface to evaporate. And always remember to simmer stock so that the impurities in the fat don't get emulsified back into the liquid as they would if the stock were boiling away. So now skim the chicken fat off the top. Again, you can choose your tool. I use this skimmer first because it takes very little moisture away. It drips all through, but the scum stays on the strainer. And you keep doing this during cooking time. You can see already that there is quite a bit of chicken fat accumulating on the top. So no matter how much fat you removed, there's still a lot under the skin of chicken. And all of that will be taken away. Let's see. And it's mostly fat. After that first skimming, add all your vegetables. And we call these the aromatics. And don't overload chicken stock with vegetables because you don't want to take away from that great, rich chicken taste. And some peppercorns, 1 teaspoon of black peppercorns, 1 dried bay leaf. I always add 2. And I'm not adding any salt at this time. The chicken stock recipe, this one, is an example of a white stock. It's the simplest stock to make. Raw bones and aromatics covered with water, gently simmered to yield a very pure, clean flavored stock with a light color. Now for a really light stock, cook this for 1.5 to 2 hours. For a more intensely flavored stock, 3 to 4 hours. I'm going to cook this one for about 3 hours today. I want it to have a rich, full flavor. So look at the color of the stock. And I'm passing the stock by ladling it from the pan to a cheesecloth-lined strainer. And just gently do this. Get as much stock out of here as possible. And what's happening is that a very pretty stock is accumulating in the bottom of the pan. So what a simple procedure. And you have the best chicken stock you've ever tasted. So much better than opening a can. Now, of course, you're going to strain all of this into here ultimately, but look at that beautiful stock. Now, whatever you accumulate in the pan, just let it cool to room temperature, chill it, and then we're going to skim off the fat. So here we have chilled stock. It's already become gelatinous. And gelatin gives stock its body. It's produced when that connective tissue in the meat breaks down during the simmering process. And if prepared correctly, your stock should gel when chilled. Now with the edge of a sharp spoon, just scrape off the remaining schmaltz or chicken fat and discard. But this is a pretty clear, delicious looking stock. And it is very jellied, which makes me very, very thrilled because it means we did our job right. So this is what it looks like. And you can just scoop this out and store in quart containers or pint containers like that in your freezer. You can use this stock immediately or store in the refrigerator for maybe up to 3 days. If longer than that, I would suggest putting it into your freezer. But you're going to get between 2 and 3 quarts of ultra delicious homemade stock. Now make sure that you label your containers clearly with the date. So on a rainy weekend that you just happen to be at home, make yourself some stocks and get ready to do a lot more cooking with an emboldened liquid. I'm just cutting up vegetables because I wanted to show you another way to cook chicken stock, which is in the pressure cooker, which cuts the time down by 2/3 at least. And a pressure cooker like this, with a top like that, is a special cooking pot with an airtight lid, which locks, and it has a valve system to regulate internal pressure. And because steam builds up inside the pressurized pot, food cooks at a very high temperature, reducing the cooking time. That's why this method is quite ideal for making long cooking things like stocks. We'll start with the chicken because it has to come up to a boil. Backs, wing tips, wings, legs, whatever, small pieces of chicken, better. And this is, again, 5 pounds of chicken, washed. And it looks good. Cover with 10 cups of water because it's not going to cook as long and won't evaporate, as opposed to the 16 cups of water that we cooked with in the stock pot method. So bring this to a boil, and you're going to skim off all the scum. The vegetables cut into approximately 1-inch pieces. You want them to add as much flavor as possible while they're under pressure. And the same, bay leaf, peppercorns, very, very similar. So now pressure cookers reduce cooking time without destroying the food's nutritional value. The steaming, the pressure steaming, draws gelatin out of the bones more quickly. And that's what we really want. We want a gelatinous stock as clear as possible and as flavorful as possible. So the stock is just coming to a boil, and of course, remove any visible fat. Now add your vegetables. We'll reduce the heat after we put the top on and the pressure comes up. And your bay leaf, don't forget, and your peppercorns. Put the top on and wait for the pressure to come to high. So now reduce the heat just enough to maintain high pressure and cook for 30 minutes. So now the steam is almost down. To release that further, just push on this particular pressure cooker. This releases the steam. Before you open it, you really would like to release all the steam. So just wait for that blue button to completely retract. And then same procedure as with the stock pot stock. Pass the stock through a cheesecloth lined sieve into a large heat-proof measuring cup or bowl or pot, and let it come to room temperature, chill, and defat. So then you're going to freeze it or use it. Now, because this stock was cooked in a short period of time, it's going to be a much lighter color stock, but it's going to have a actually deeper flavor because it was cooked under pressure. And if you get a little impatient waiting for the pressure to decline, as I have been waiting for it, you can actually run the pot under cool water and it will reduce the pressure much, much quicker. There, now we can just release. Oh, smells so good. And you'll end up with more stock than in the stock pot method. There's very little evaporation. So now just strain. You can see the stock is a little bit lighter in color, a little yellower, and certainly extremely fragrant. I want you to see what you're getting. Very beautiful, light stock. Do not press on the solids. You don't want to release any more of the fat than it's been released already. But what a great stock, and what a time-saving device. And as we proceed with the show, making beef stock and vegetable stock, you can, of course, use the pressure cooker for either of those to save time. Now I'd like to show you how to make a brown beef stock. When making beef stock, the meat, the bones, and the aromatics are roasted first to give a deeper flavor and darker color to the stock. And what you do is, in a big roasting pan like this, put some unflavored oil, sort of a safflower oil or a canola oil, and strew 4 pounds of veal bones. These come from the shank, and some oxtail or neck bones. These are lovely for a stock, oxtail. Like that, right into the fat. Add a little bit more oil and get this right into a 400-degree oven and roast, turning once and stirring often for even browning, for about 45 minutes. So this goes right into the oven. So the oxtails and the veal bones are nicely browned. Add 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. This can be canned or out of a tube, but get a good flavorful tomato paste and stir that around in the pan. This will add some depth of color to your sauce. And then add your vegetables. Your aromatics are a different thing in a stock like this. We're not even peeling the onions. It's really kind of great that you can just put the skins in there. The celery, washed of course. 2 ribs of celery. 2 carrots, unpeeled but washed, put into the pan. 2 yellow onions. And 4 cloves of garlic. Also, they don't have to be peeled, but I like to smash them a little bit for the pot. And stir this around. Put that right back into the 400-degree oven and roast until the vegetables are browned and tender and the bones are deeply browned. So that takes about 40 minutes longer. So you can see the bones have gotten a beautiful color, especially the oxtails. And the vegetables are tender. Now here's where we are using a deep stock pot because we want as little evaporation as possible while we are cooking the stock. So there's quite a bit of fat which I am going to pour off. Try not to pour off the brown bits. That's going to add color to your stock. And now on high heat, 1 cup of red wine. And we'll deglaze the pan. Now you can burn off the alcohol by boiling that red wine down by 1/3 or 1/2. Smells so delicious. And then pour all of this right into the stock pot. Now take this to the sink and fill so that everything is covered by at least 2 inches. That's going to take at least 6 quarts of water. And if you want, and I do, rinse my pan a little bit so that I'm sure I'm getting every bit of goodness into the stock pot. So to better extract flavor and to preserve clarity, begin cooking the stock with cold water. Don't add hot water to this, use cold. So now look at the color. It is such a rich color already. And now bring this to a boil, reduce to a simmer, and cook for approximately 8 hours. So notice I've reduced the heat so it's just barely simmering. Remember, boiling a stock is going to make a cloudy stock. So I'm taking off whatever impurities is on the top. There's not much, not yet. And now is the time to add our aromatics. A big bunch of parsley like this, some fresh thyme, 2 teaspoons of black peppercorns, and a couple bay leaves. Submerge those into the stock and allow to simmer very slowly over low heat for approximately 8 hours. So make sure you start this in the morning or by noontime if you don't want to stay up all night, because you're going to have to add a little bit more hot water if necessary to keep everything submerged. So our stock is done. Now notice it's really cooked down quite substantially, but everything has stayed submerged during the cooking time. I'm just going to remove the big bones to a bowl, and if you boil this down even more, you will have a demi-glace, a very rich flavoring that you can add to stews and sauces. I always like putting it through the cheesecloth because it really does take out all of the impurities. And this is what it looks like when it's chilled. There's quite a layer of this orangey fat on top. Oh, look, it's coming off all in one piece. Makes that an easy job. This is going to be discarded, of course. And here's your gorgeous broth. Very rich, very flavorful. So good. What a great stew or soup this would make. Beef stock made the old-fashioned way in a stock pot. More and more people are choosing not to eat meat, so vegetable stock is a great alternative to chicken stock or beef stock, and it's also a great option when braising vegetables or when making soups, stews, or risotto. And it's very easy to make and can be very flavorful, and you can pretty much add what you like to vegetable stock. This is a simple, basic vegetable stock that does not take long to make. I'm heating 3 tablespoons of a nice light olive oil in this pan, and I am going to brown half of a white onion. You can use leeks, you can use onion. Leeks add a very nice sweetness, I find, to a vegetable stock. And we have 2 cloves of garlic. And we're not going to brown the vegetables too much, just sort of get them kind of golden color. So this goes right into the oil. That'll start browning and getting a little translucent. Use mild-tasting vegetables if you want a nice, mild-tasting, rich broth. Onions, celery, mushrooms, leeks. Avoid strong-tasting vegetables like artichokes, spinach, cruciferous vegetables like cabbage or broccoli or cauliflower. Those strong flavors will really overpower a stock, and it'll actually make what I call a stinky stock, which you don't want. And then 2 ribs of celery, 2 nice carrots, and just cut these up into small pieces. Remember, it's the same as with meat stock. The smaller the pieces of ingredients, the more flavor will come out of those ingredients. There's no need to peel the carrot, and no need to actually take off the leaves if you don't want to. They taste good. Now the yield on this will be about 2 quarts of stock. So just until these start to brown, and it'll take about 10 or 12 minutes. Then add your carrots and celery. You can add some peppercorns and some bay leaf. And I also have some very nice herbs, fresh thyme, fresh basil, and fresh flat leaf parsley. So when I add the carrots and the celery, we have our mirepoix. Add black pepper, about 1/4 teaspoon, and get these cooking a little bit. Scraps that you might otherwise compost or discarded may be added to your vegetable stock, like the tops of leeks, parsley stems, the bad ends, the woody ends of asparagus, shiitake mushroom stems, carrot peels, ends from squashes. You can freeze these scraps until you're ready to make stock. Before you add the water, everything should be just lightly browned and a little bit tender, about 10 minutes. If you can get the vegetables on the verge of caramelization, you can get a more intense flavor. and a darker color. If you want a very deep flavor, you can add what my mother always added to her vegetable stock, dried mushrooms. Those wonderful Italian or Chinese or Polish dried mushrooms. Very, very flavorful. So now we can add water to cover. I would say somewhere between 8 to 10 cups. Now you can raise the heat again. Now, as opposed to meat stock or chicken stock, if this does boil, it's not going to get terribly cloudy compared to a meat stock. There's not any of that fat to emulsify. Now I'm adding 8 sprigs of flat leaf parsley, 8 sprigs of basil, and some fresh thyme. And this is one stock that you will season with salt. And I would say about 3/4 of a teaspoon to start. So bring that to a boil, reduce heat to a gentle simmer, and cook uncovered for 1 hour. So this is what it looks like after 1 hour. The brief cooking time of vegetable stock ensures that flavors are extracted but not lost. And so just as we strained our beef stock and our chicken stock, you can strain this lovely vegetable stock. I'm not even using cheesecloth because I don't think we have to. So fragrant. And now you can press on the vegetables because there's no fat to extract, and just get as much liquid out as possible. You have a very flavorful, beautiful vegetable stock to make your risotto, to make your vegetable soups. Now cool this to room temperature. You can freeze it or use it within 3 days. Having homemade stock like these in your freezer means that soup can be made in minutes. Sauces and stews will take on new and complex richness, and the extra flavor enables you to cut back on fats and salt. Now that I've shared my tips and techniques, be sure to stock up with your favorites. I'll see you for our next lesson on Martha's Cooking School.